So before we start, there's something I do need to talk about. For this marathon, for this starter, as I was putting the whole list together and everything, it came down to Aladdin or Lion King for the starter of this marathon. And seeing how they're both amazing movies in their own right, I couldn't pick between them. I just couldn't. I felt like if I left one of them off, I was going to feel absolutely horrible. Because it is one of my favorites. Well, both of them are one of my favorites, but that's besides the point. However, I can tell you right now, this is not a 10 out of 10 movie. Don't expect that. It's not a 10 out of 10 movie. It's not a perfect movie. But it is still a great one, and I think it's about on equal footing with Aladdin. So, let's discuss. What's up? What's happening? What's going on? Welcome back to Animation Numbers. This is different anything and everything animation. Welcome back to our Disney-Vember marathon. Welcome to The Lion King. This is the big one. The big animated Academy Award winner. The big movie that everyone considers one of the greatest Disney movies ever made. And I'd say it's a little bit overrated. Now, don't get me wrong. Put down your pitchforks. This is still a great movie. Absolutely. This is a great movie. It deserves its iconicity and its status in pop culture. But those calling it the best Disney movie or one of the greatest animated movies ever made, that's debatable. At least in my opinion. So, let's go ahead and start as we always do with these reviews now, with our plot synopsis. And thankfully, this one is much shorter than Aladdin's, so this shouldn't take too long. The story of The Lion King takes place in an African kingdom called the Pride Lands, where a lion rules over other animals as king. In the lands of Africa, in the circle life, Rafiki, a mandrill shaman, anoints Simba, the newborn cub of King Mufasa and Queen Sarabi, hope I'm saying that right, and presents him to a gathering of animals at Pride Rock. Meanwhile, Mufasa's younger brother, Scar, who decided not to be at the ceremony, is annoyed that he is no longer the heir to the throne. Mufasa confronts Scar about not attending the ceremony and says to not turn his back on him when he tries to leave. When Scar says Mufasa should not turn his back on him and Mufasa asks him if it is a challenge, Scar replies that he would not dream of it as he lacks brute strength. After Scar leaves, Mufasa wonders what to do with him. A few years later, Mufasa shows a young cub Simba the Pride Lands and explains to him the responsibilities of kingship and the circle of life, which connects all living things. Meanwhile, Scar plots to eliminate Mufasa and Simba so he may become king. Because he's the villain of the movie, and that's what villains do. He tricks Simba and his best friend Nala into exploring a forbidden elephant graveyard. Simba, Nala, and Zazu heads off to the watering hole, rather as he just can't wait to be king. Sorry, I'm not saying every single line. Simba and Nala make it to the elephant graveyard, where they are chased by three hyenas named Shenzi, Banzai, and Ed, who are in league with Scar, naturally. Mufasa is alerted of the incident by Zazu and rescues the cubs. Though disappointed in Simba, Mufasa, I don't know why I said that. Mufasa eventually forgives him and explains that the great kings of the past watch over them from the night sky, from which he will one day watch over Simba. Later that night, Scar gains the loyalty of the hyenas by claiming that if he becomes king, they will never go hungry again, if they help him kill Mufasa and Simba with Be Prepared. Plotting further, Scar gathers more hyenas, forming an army. Sometime later, Scar lures Simba into a gorge for a surprise from his father, then signals the hyenas to create a wildebeest stampede down the gorge where Simba is. Alerted by an insincerely dramatic Scar, Mufasa races to rescue Simba from the stampede. He saves his son but is left clinging to the edge of the cliff, which results in Scar fleeing him off into the stampede to his death. Scar convinces Simba that he was responsible for his own father's death, and he recommends that he flees the Pride Lands and never returns. To compound this, Scar once again sends the hyenas to kill Simba, but as Simba reaches a thorny embankment, they let him escape, hurling threats that he will be killed if ever seen again. That night back at Pride Rock, Scar informs Sarabi, Nala, and the rest of the Pride that both Mufasa and Simba were killed in a stampede, and that he is assuming the throne as the closest of kin. After becoming king, Scar fulfills his promise to the hyenas and allows them to come into the Pride Lands. Simba collapses in a distant desert where he is found unconscious by Timon and Pumbaa, a meerkat-warthog duo who raised Simba under their carefree Hakuna Matata lifestyle, where Simba has grown into a young adult. He saves them from a hungry lioness revealed to be Nala. Simba shows Nala around his home, and the two begin to fall in love with Can You Feel the Love Tonight? I'm not saying the actual thing because that is one of the most annoying overrated songs in all of existence, and I will fight you on that. Nala then tells him that Scar's tyrannical reign has turned the Pride Lands into a wasteland. She demands that Simba return and take his rightful place as king, but Simba refuses, still guilty about supposedly causing his father's death. Rafiki arrives later and persuades Simba to return to the Pride Lands, assisted by Mufasa's presence in the stars. After some advice from Rafiki and the ghost of his father, Simba, followed by Nala, Timon, and Pumbaa, all return home. Once back at Pride Rock, Simba, with Timon, Pumbaa, and Nala, are horrified to see the condition of the Pride Lands, which was once a lush paradise and was now a dead wasteland, with the overhunting the prey eventually left the Pride Lands, causing famine. After seeing Scar strike his mother that he is 10 times the king Mufasa was, Simba renounces his return. In response, Simba confronts Scar, who forces Simba to confess to being responsible for Mufasa's death. Scar then forces Simba over the edge of Pride Rock just as a lightning bolt starts a fire. Pretty much a bit of a signal that Scar is threatening to send Simba straight to hell. Not the last time Disney's done that either. As Simba dangles over the edge of Pride Rock, Scar whispers to Simba that he killed Mufasa. Enraged, Simba leaps up and pins Scar to the ground, forcing him to admit the truth to the Pride. A raging battle ensues between the hyenas and the lionesses, Timon and Pumbaa, which results in Simba cornering Scar. Amid their fight, Scar tries to surreptitiously, I hope I'm saying that right, blame everything on the hyenas, but the hyenas overhear his conversation with Simba and back away growling. Simba orders Scar to flee the Pride Lands. Scar pretends to leave but turns to attack him, resulting in one final duel. Simba eventually overpowers Scar by kicking and hurling him over a cliff. Scar initially survives the fall but finds himself surrounded by the now resentful hyenas. The hyenas surround their traitorous fallen leader. Scar frantically tries to absolve himself, but the hyenas finally had enough of his lies, derogatory treatment, and violated promises, so they ignore his life plea, attack him, and rip him to pieces as flames arise around and engulf them all. Pretty much signaling that they all just died. Yeah, not so happy cheery when you think about it. With Scar and the hyenas gone, and with the rightful king in place, the Pride Lands are restored, which is turning green with life again. The film concludes with Rafiki presenting Simba and Nala's newborn cub, who we later find out in the sequels is named Kira, into the air, thus continuing this circle of life. So, yeah, that's the story of The Lion King. Obviously, it's a slightly more theatrical version of, I believe it was Hamlet, if I remember correctly, because this one's based on Hamlet, and then the sequel is based on Romeo and Juliet. So, yeah, it's based off of Hamlet, and it's a nice way of taking something that dark and adult and actually making it manageable for kids. So, that's the story. It is really good, but I feel like the one in Aladdin had a lot more going on. Maybe that's also why this one's so short compared to Aladdin's. So, yeah, but it's still a really good story. It's just not quite as great as Aladdin's. Just my own personal opinion. Now let's talk about the cast. First up, we have Matthew Broderick as the voice of Simba as both a cub and an adult. He's definitely one of the most well-known Hollywood punching bags for a lot of people, including Nostalgia Critic. But in this performance, he is fine. Like, he's not, like, the most compelling person in the world, and his performance is kind of flat. It's still, you can tell it's Matthew Broderick, but it's still good. Like, he's not phoning it in or completely treating it like nothing more than a paycheck. He does a decent job with the role. It's just that they could have probably casted someone better. That would bring a bit more energy to it. Just my personal opinion. Then there's Jonathan Taylor Thomas as young Simba. He's okay. Jason Weaver as young Simba is really good. That's his singing voice. And then the singing voice of adult Simba is Joseph Williams, who does a good job. Moira Kelly, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, as Nala is great. And you have Nikita Kalame, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, as young Nala, the voice of young Nala. And then you have the singing voice provided by Laura Williams, and then adult Nala singing is provided by Sally Dorsey. All of them do a great job. Then you have Jeremy Irons as Scar. Again, arguably one of the best Disney villains ever. He's conniving, he's maniacal, he's tyrannical, he's evil, but he's cunning. And he's not as over the top about it as Jafar. So I think they'd about stay on the same equal plane as each other. I think they're both great villains, they're both classic Disney villains, but I don't know, maybe something about me watching Aladdin more as a kid rather than Lion King, not out of circumstance, not like out of personal choice, it was all circumstance. I ended up preferring Jafar more over Scar, but it's just by the slightest hair. They're both fantastic villains. And then of course you have Jim Cummings back again, this time as Scar's singing voice, and he does an amazing job. Then you have James Earl Jones, the voice of Darth Vader, is the voice of Mufasa. He does a great job in here. Nathan Lane as Timon is great. Ernie Sabella as Pumbaa is great. Rowan Atkinson, yes, Mr. Bean, is the voice of Zazu. He does a great job. Robert Gulami as Rafiki is great. Madge Sinclair as Sarabi's good. Whoopi Goldberg as Shenzi is good, but you can definitely tell it's one of those, hey, let's throw the celebrity in here for marquee value kind of moments. Then you have Cheech Marin as Bonsai, which is also good. Jim Cummings is also Ed and Mole, which is also really good. And then Zoe Leader as Serafina. So, yeah, the voice acting here is still really good, but it's definitely obvious that Jeremy Irons is the definite standout. It's him and Mufasa. Scar and Mufasa, Jeremy Irons, and James Earl Jones are the two standouts of the movie. The rest are really good, and I would argue that a close third is Rowan Atkinson. He is hilarious as Zazu. And then for the additional voices, the background stuff, you had Frank Welker, Kathy Cavadini, Judy Duran, Daman Kroll, David McCarran, or McCarran, however you pronounce that, Linda Phillips, Phil Proctor, and David Randolph. So not as many additional voices this time as the last one. And then you have a really long development. Alright, now we gotta talk about the music. Elton John and Tim Rice wrote 5 original songs for this film, with Elton John performing Can You Feel the Love Tonight? I'm sorry, I hate that song. It's so over the top and cheesy. The film's score was composed by Hans Zimmer. Don't need to say much about him, he's a legendary composer, and supplemented with traditional African music and choir elements arranged by Lebo M. And then they have a bunch of the other songs. You have like Hakuna Matata, Be Prepared. They're all great songs, aside from Can You Feel the Love Tonight. That's the only one I would say is bad. But it's just because it hasn't aged well. I'm sure back then it was more than serviceable, but nowadays, not great. And then we have the release. The Lion King garnered widespread critical acclaim, and at Rotten Tomatoes, based on 128 reviews, the film has an overall approval rating of 93% with a weighted average score of 8.41 out of 10. Among Rotten Tomatoes' cream of the crop, which consists of popular and notable critics from the top newspapers, websites, televisions, and radio programs, the film holds an overall approval rating of 100%. Naturally, it is The Lion King. By comparison, Metacritic, which assigns a standard score of 0 to 100 ratings to reviews from mainstream critics, calculated an average score of 84 from the 13 reviews it collected. Only 13, jeez. And then, of course, you have like the different versions, because this has been released so many times. You had the original version that was originally released in March of 1995. Then you had a Masterpiece Collection Edition. Then you had the Platinum Edition in 2003. You had the Diamond Edition in 2011. And you had the Signature Collection release, a 4K Ultra, in 2018. So, yeah, this movie's been released a dozen times if you haven't already seen that. And not to mention, it was also originally available on VHS. Because, back in the 90s, VHS still existed. And then, of course, there's a ton of references and trivia, but we're not really going to go over all that, so. Yeah, I guess I'll just finish up my overall thoughts on the movie. I think this is still a very great movie, but I think it's for slightly different reasons. It's more for the themes and how well it translates Hamlet into a more kid-friendly theatrical film. Rather than the characters, which are good, some are great, but at the same time, it's characters you expect from Disney movies. It's nothing new. The pacing is still a little bit off. I don't know what it is, but something about it, when it gets to the part where you have adult Simba talking with Nala, having their whole "Can you feel the love tonight" moment, and then they fast forward immediately to them arguing. Like, seriously? Seriously. But that's really my only two gripes with this movie. Outside of that, it still has great voice acting, it still has really good characters, a good story. It's just a really great movie. And then, of course, all the songs, aside from Can You Feel the Love Tonight, are fantastic. Obviously, Hakuna Matata being the favorite. So, yeah, I've discussed the pros, I've discussed the little cons and nitpicks I have with this movie, and overall, this is a great movie, and I'd definitely say go see it, but I reckon you already have, considering the fact that this is one of those rare times that a animated film actually got to win an Academy Award besides the obvious Best Animated Film category. If I remember correctly, this one was nominated and or won Best Picture. So, that's really rare for any animated film, let alone a Disney film. So, I know I talked a lot in the last marathon about how horror movies getting worldwide recognition and Academy Awards is a huge rarity. Animated films getting recognized for more than just Best Animated Movie category is even rarer. And heck, I think at this point it's outright not allowed by the Academy for whatever stupid reason. But yeah, I mean, it's The Lion King. If you've seen it, it's still just as great as when you saw it as a kid. And if you, for some reason, still haven't seen it yet, you're missing out. And for those of you that decided to watch the remake over this, I'm sorry, but your standards are in the toilet. I'm sorry, that remake is so bad. But anyway, I'm trying to talk positive here, and positively, Lion King deserves a high final verdict of another 8 out of 10. I can't give it any higher than that because it still has a few minor problems, just like Aladdin. And while I do think Aladdin is a better film, story-wise, I feel like this one's better in terms of its villain, well, not its villain, in terms of its pacing and overall themes of kings and what happens when you go to the great beyond, stuff like that. So, yeah, one's great for story, the other one's great for themes. Take your pick, or you can watch both of them in one marathon. This was back before movies were 3 hours freaking long, so yeah, you can pretty much watch both of these in a double feature if you so desire, like I literally just had to do today. So, yeah, that's going to wrap it up, and that's the final one for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And from here on out, it's only going to be one Disney movie a day. I only did 2 for this first one because I could not pick between this and Aladdin. So I had to cover them both, and I can only hope that my review was entertaining to you. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time when we talk about one of my personal favorites from my childhood and a movie that doesn't get nearly the respect that it deserves. I'll tell you all about it tomorrow when we discuss Pocahontas.